the speech event? Well, it is an event that actually consists of two sort of sub-events. Each student is responsible for delivering to a panel of 2 to 3 judges a prepared speech as well as an impromptu speech. And also, there will be a timer present in the room in addition to those 3 judges to officially time and record each speech. The rules of the speech event are as follows. For the prepared speech, the topic is open. It is something that is selected by the student, and it's a speech that is developed and written by the student, although the coach does provide approval for that topic. The speech itself must be the original work of the student. It's current for the given academic decathlon season, so they cannot be reusing a speech from the prior year. It must be delivered from a standing position, so you will not have seated students. You will not have students who are using a lectern or a podium of any sort. It is something where they need to stand in the room and deliver it from that position. The time is something that is very specific. The time limit of this speech must be between 3.5 and 4 minutes long. And there is a penalty if they either go under that time or go over that time. And as far as going over that time, there is no courtesy time for finishing a sentence. So if they exhaust that 4-minute time period, they must stop speaking or they will receive a penalty for that speech. Note cards may be used by a student, and you will find that there will be some students in your room who will use note cards as opposed to completely having their speech memorized. However, the speech cannot be read directly from those note cards. If a student reads their speech from those note cards, there are specific rules governing exactly how that particular delivery of a speech must be scored. That would represent a poorly prepared speech and should not be scored above the fair range. That's the range that is 0 to 4 on the score sheet in any category except for correctness and appropriateness. And we'll go over those different categories later in the training, but it's important to understand that if a student does actually read their speech, there is a specific manner in which they need to be scored. And you will know when a student is reading their speech as opposed to simply holding their note cards and referring to them from time to time. If they are reading their speech, you will actually see them looking down at their note cards and hardly looking up at all. That is what would constitute reading a speech. Gestures are acceptable and in fact are very expected. You won't have a successful speech without some form of gestures, but a student may not use any kind of props or costumes. That's not permitted as part of the rules. The next portion of the speech competition is the impromptu speech. The impromptu speech, again, must be given from a standing position without a lectern or a podium. The time limit for the impromptu speech is shorter. It must be between 1.5 minutes and 2 minutes long, but again, there is no courtesy time for finishing a sentence. So that 2-minute limit is a hard and fast limit, and if they go over that time, they will be penalized. Likewise, if they are under the 1.5-minute period of time, they will be penalized as well. The student has 1 minute to read a set of impromptu topics that you will provide to them, select one, and prepare what they're going to say for that speech. So they will not see those topics until they go into that room and finish their prepared speech. The next thing that you will do, as we'll learn when we go through the speech session a little bit later on today, the next thing that they will do is they will see those impromptu topics and they will have 1 minute to read those and prepare. And that will be a timed period that is timed by the timer in your room. Note cards may be used for the impromptu speech as well, and you will find that students will actually write a few notes down on the note cards during that 1 minute preparation period, and they may hold that note card and refer to it while they're speaking during their impromptu speech as well. What you need to understand about the note cards, though, is that specifically for impromptu speeches, you need to ensure that if they write anything on a note card, that you take those note cards from them before they leave the room. There's a number of guidelines that we ask you to follow as you are going through the evening of your speech judging. The most important thing to do is to ensure that you stay on time. what you will find when you look at the schedule that you have for your students is that you only have 10 minutes per student. The next guideline to follow is to make sure that you be as consistent and uniform in the procedures that you use for each competitor as much as possible. These students are coached by their coaches to know what to expect when they walk into that speech judging room. And so we need to ensure that we not only as judges follow the instructions that were provided as part of this training session, but follow them consistently for each competitor that comes through your room throughout the evening or throughout the afternoon. As far as scoring goes, you'll need to ensure that your scoring is fair, is objective, and is consistent. And we'll talk a little bit later about scoring in more detail. But the most important thing to understand about scoring that is fair is that fair means that you need to give a student a good score when they deserve a good score, when they have a good speech that was prepared and delivered very well in front of the panel of judges. However, if a student doesn't perform so well, we need to ensure that that score is again reflective of that performance that may not be a very good performance. So please ensure that fairness is observed at all times and that the score is actually reflective of what the student actually did in that room there. Please do your best to create a relaxing atmosphere and a positive atmosphere for the students that are in your room. Be an active listener. When they're speaking, make eye contact with them, nod, smile, be very positive and attentive as much as possible. Don't look down at the scoring form. While they're speaking, you can start scoring their prepared speech while they're preparing for their impromptu speech, but as soon as that student comes over and starts speaking to you for either the prepared speech or the impromptu speech, please make sure that you're giving them your utmost attention. And the final thing that I'll say is please make sure that you refrain from giving the student any leading comments about their performance during the speech event. So obviously you want to interact with them, you want to create that positive atmosphere, you want to, allow them to introduce themselves to you at the beginning and then also at the very end wish them well. It's certainly acceptable to say things like, good luck in the competition, have a great time, it was nice hearing your speech, but please make sure that you don't say anything that is overwhelmingly positive or negative that would lead them in any manner to understand what their score would be before they leave that room. They'll see their score later, it'll be understood at that point in time. Please don't give them an indication of what that is while they're still in the judging room. The room should be set up in a very particular way. We're guests here at this site for this competition, and we need to ensure that when we go into these judging rooms, which are typically classrooms, that we are being courteous to our hosts. So if you do need to move any furniture around, any desks, any tables, please make sure that you note how the furniture was arranged before you move it so that you can move it back to where it was at the end of the competition. But what you'll see on the display right now is a diagram of how you need to set up your room. There are 3 judges in the room that should be seated next to each other and should be in very clear view of the student. The student should be standing basically right in front of where the judges are seated. You need to ensure that the student has enough room to move around and have gestures and things of that nature for their speech. And it's also very important to ensure that their back is to the door. A lot of doors have windows on them, and there will be students outside waiting for their turn next in the judging room, and we need to make sure that anything that's going on in the hallway outside the room doesn't distract the competing student who's actually delivering their speech. And the best way to do that is to ensure that their back is to the door. And then the final thing that you need to make sure that is set up properly is the desk or the table for the timer. The timer can be seated slightly behind where the judges are. However, the timer needs to be in clear view of the student. The timer will be holding up timing cards at designated points during the prepared speech and the impromptu speech, and the competing student needs to be able to see that timer as clearly as possible when they hold up those timing cards. Another helpful thing to do is to set up another desk or a table in the room close to where you're seated that has blank note cards and a couple pencils, and this is for the student to prepare their impromptu speech. So when you hand them the impromptu speech topic sheet, you can indicate that they can go over to that table or desk and use those materials, use those note cards and those pencils as a place to take notes if they so choose. We have a few instructions that are specific to the head judge in the room. This is judge number 1. There's also judge number 2 and judge number 3, and all 3 of you have very, very important responsibilities. But judge number 1, we assign a few extra responsibilities to ensure that everything runs smoothly in the room. The number 1 thing is just to basically be the point contact to resolve any issues that might occur during the judging session. So there might be questions that arise, and typically we have our head judges, or our judge number 1, our experienced judges who've been through competition a few different times before and might have some good ideas about how to resolve issues that come up. So that's the first responsibility. The next responsibility, just to reiterate, is to make sure that you stay on time. Start on time, stay on time, end on time. Try to stick to that schedule as much as possible so that the students are kept on their schedule as well. The next thing you'll need to do is just make sure that all the judges have their proper scoring forms. Depending upon how we gave you the scoring forms today, you may have all of the scoring forms, Judge 1, for all 3 judges, or the scoring forms may be distributed to the other judges, but please just ensure that every judge has a scoring form for every student that is listed on the roster for your room. The next thing is that you need to make sure that you're scoring the student at the proper time on the proper score sheet. Each student will be wearing a badge with their name and with their student number on it. They should be coming to your room at the designated time on your room roster. When you go to the door to invite them into the room, please ensure that it is the proper student and that you are set up to score that student on the proper scoring form. Now we're going to look at a sample speech session. We've put together this video of what an actual speech session looks like so that you can see what we've learned so far in action. Hi, John.
Yes. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Welcome.
And,
Hi, John.
Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
So your prepared speech will be first. The timer is going to read the timing instructions to you.
Okay, great.
A prepared speech is in time if you speak between 3.5 and 4 minutes. After you've spoken for 3 minutes, I will hold up the 1-minute card, meaning you have 1 minute left to speak. After you've spoken for 3.5 minutes, I will hold up the 30-second card, meaning you have spoken for 3.5 minutes and still have 30 seconds left if you need them. After you have spoken for 4 minutes, I will hold up the 0 card, meaning time is up. I will not say stop, but you have no grace period and will be penalized if you continue.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Go ahead and begin whenever you're ready.
It's not easy being green. Or at least, that's what Kermit the Frog said on his Muppet Show. Now, you and I may not be able to identify with Kermit's complaint, but aside from having a nice green lawn, or a wallet filled with green, most people tend to avoid this mossy, moldy color. And with everything from No matter how you look at it, a green life is a tough life. It's just not easy being green.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Your impromptu speech will be next, and the timing works the same way, except it's 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes long. So would you like to have the timing instructions read to you again?
No, that's okay.
Okay. So you will have a minute to prepare.
Thank you.
Time is up.
Go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Right, thank you. St. Catherine of Siena once said that nothing great is ever achieved without much enduring. And as I look back and describe what can only be labeled as enduring academic catalog, I can't help but agree with this statement because you were right.
Cool, thank you very much. Good
Thank
luck
you.
in the rest of the competition.
Thank you. Thank you for volunteering.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Were there any penalties?
Yes, there was one on the prepared, but none on the impromptu.
Thank you very much for your service as judges. You're going to have a fun time today, and I really appreciate your support and your time.